souls. And to build a life from every misdeed. That we all may be born with the weapons we need.
Where the metal rubbed the skin, a persistent itch brought her back from the brink. Not death, but something adjacent to it. Nancy wasn't dead. Her ankle itched like never before, and she was no longer unconscious. She was, however, still chained to a tree, and the chain was the cause of the all-consuming itch. This was the second time she'd been chained up, but the first time to a tree. God, if only this itching would stop. She kicked her chained foot with her free left foot, and immediately wished she hadn't. The sensation erupted like fire ants under the metal cuff, and spread up her leg in waves that made her vision white out. When it came back, the world looked reassembled by someone who didn't quite remember how it was supposed to look. The pine trees above her swayed in a wind she couldn't feel. The air was cold enough to sting the inside of her nostrils. Breathe in, breathe out. Assess and overcome. What was that phrase? The one from the video her sister had sent her. The beige woman in the white room who made it sound so simple. Like breathing was something you could learn to do better. Like the body was a thing that listened. I'm not calm. An owl hooted somewhere in the dark, and I became aware of the stars. They were marvellously bright, the kind of bright that only happened far from town, far from streetlights, far from anything, honestly. It was so sad this had to happen on a night like this. The sky above me was enormous and indifferent, and I lay there, looking up at it, and felt very small. Who? Any other night, an owl would have been beautiful. Now it mocked me. Sat up there, in its dark cathedral of pine needles, and asked the only question that mattered. Who do you think is coming for you? No one. I shifted, and the gravel bit into my palms, sharp and real. In a way, the other pain was not. Fragments of my memory returned. The warehouse, and the smell of oil, and old blood. The way I stayed silent when they asked where the money was, because saying her name to those men would have felt like handing them something sacred. I would rather have bled out on that floor than given them that. The tears came without permission and surprised me more than the pain did. I felt them track down my temples and into my hair. I couldn't stand crying, not when my parents died, not when my sister stopped returning calls, not when she shattered my heart, and I understood that the world I'd been building in my head had no foundation at all. Did I deserve this? Did I deserve any of it? I didn't have an answer, but I had something better. I had a weak link, rust where the metal joined, the kind that came from years of sitting in pickup trucks and garden sheds. The gang was sloppy when they were angry, and they were angry with me. They assumed wrongly that the dark and the isolation would finish what they'd started. They didn't know me. I'd spent 3 years learning how this town worked, how people behaved when they thought no one was watching. The camera angle at the Texaco that missed the east side by exactly 6 feet. The 4-minute gap when the night shift guards changed at the mill. I noticed everything. That was how I survived, and that was how I became someone the gang trusted with their pills and their money and their quiet business in the witching hours. And it was how I'd found her. But that came later. First, there was the chain. I worked the link while I cried, twisted it back and forth the way you work a loose tooth when you're a kid, except this tooth was made of rusted iron, and every rotation sent a bolt of white-hot nothing from my ankle to the base of my spine. My fingers were going numb, and I could feel the blood drying on my wrists where the bark had torn the skin. The owl watched from somewhere overhead, a witness to this small violence. Suddenly, the metal gave. Not much. Just enough. I pulled and my ankle tore, and I tasted blood, where I'd bitten through my lip sometime in the night. The link snapped, and the chain fell away, and I sat on the ground for a long moment, just breathing. The air was sharp with pine resin, and underneath it, something earthier. Wet soil, decaying leaves. Behind my ribs, something kicked and fluttered like a small animal trying to get out. Then I stood. My left leg didn't want to cooperate. A swelling in my shin pulsed with my heartbeat, like a second heart had taken up residence there. I tested it by shifting my weight, and a hot spike of pain made me gasp. Not broken, probably. Sprained, maybe. It didn't matter. I could walk. I pressed my palm flat against the tree that had held me prisoner. The bark was rough and cold under my hand. I looked toward town. The pines thinned out ahead of me, and through the gaps I could see the glow. Red neon cutting through the dark like a wound that wouldn't close. The Texaco station tucked in the odd corner of town where the road curved and the streetlights gave up trying. It glowed red as it always does. The star on the sign flickered because Dale, who owned the place, spent his money on other things. Things everyone in Old Bark Hill knew about, but nobody mentioned. That's how this town works. You don't mention the things. You carry them around like stones in your pockets, and you never talk about the weight. I stared at that red glow for a long time and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been wound tight started to loosen. 3 weeks since I believed that what passed between us in 30 seconds of darkness was something real, something chosen, something that meant I existed in another person's mind the way she existed in mine. I had replayed those 30 seconds so many times they'd worn grooves in my thinking. The exact angle of her face turning toward me, the warmth of her breath when she leaned close, the way the dashboard light caught her throat and made something in my chest crack open like an egg. I had built an entire architecture of meaning from that moment and stacked belief on belief until I couldn't see the ground anymore. And then the ground disappeared entirely. I turned away from the glow, away from the memory. My breath came out in small white clouds that dissolved into the dark, and I watched them go and thought about how quickly things disappear when no one is holding on to them. I knew these woods, the paths that cut through without touching roads, which way the cameras pointed and which way they didn't, the schedule of the night shift at the mill, 3 years of learning old Bark Hill by moving through it in the dark when everyone else was asleep and the town showed you its real face. The real face was ugly, but it was honest. I started walking, limping, really, toward town and toward the places where people kept the things they thought were safe. My ankles screamed with each step, shrieked, and the cold had teeth in my bones, and my ribs ached where the fists had landed. But none of it mattered, because something else was happening in my head, something that had been taking shape since the warehouse, since the tree. Since the owl started asking its questions, a solution had arrived. Quietly. The way solutions do when you stop fighting and start thinking clearly. There was a debt, and the gang wanted money. Money I didn't have, because I'd given away what I should have sold. I'd broken the cardinal rule. Never give away what you can sell. But there were other currencies in old Barkill, other ways to make things even. I kept walking, the nights still young,